Okay, so hi, I'm Yaili. I am a staff program manager at GitHub in the design operations team. I am Panamanian Portuguese, spent most of my childhood in Portugal, but I've moved to London 14 years ago, so I've been here a while, and I'm currently living in Leighton, in East London, with my family. I do need to find a better photo than the previous one because I have a new baby who is attending today. If she starts making a lot of noise, she will be quickly removed from the room. Don't worry. And I am currently on maternity leave. So I've been working on design operations for many years now, even before it had a name. I studied design, and I started my career as a web designer, and I was a designer for many years. But as years went by and my responsibilities started to change, I wasn't really a designer anymore or a design lead, also not necessarily a project manager or even a product manager. So it was great when the term design operations started being used, and I finally had a name to explain the list of things that I would normally do on a given week. Today we're going to see how DesignOps is a way for design teams to connect the dots, connect information and people, both inside your company, but maybe also outside of your company. And we'll see how, by being more aware of these connections, you can be more intentional about what DesignOps initiatives and projects you work on and give priority to. And also a few ways that we've been doing that at GitHub and how that's been working out for us. There's one question that I'd like you to think about, to keep in mind throughout this talk, which is, are you the DesignOps person at your company or in your team without knowing it? Sorry, I just realized I have my headphones on. I'm always listening to podcasts. This obviously is a more valid question if there isn't an official team or person at your company, but even if there is, you might be doing design operations things without realizing that. So what does it mean to do design ops? What things might you be doing that are design ops related? So design ops helps to connect designers to each other, to connect the design org to other parts of the business, to connect the design team to the community. Basically, it connects people and information and people and work. At GitHub, we see it a little bit like an API. So like an API, it lets you connect endpoints. It creates a system where you can interact between different things, and hopefully it hides the complexity of that system and only surfaces what's relevant and useful when you need it. And it makes these connections with purpose, with strategic vision. You can usually divide design ops into 3 buckets: people, practices, and tools. Let's look at a few examples for each of these buckets. So for people, you have things like hiring and onboarding, learning and development, career ladders. Practices can be things like how you plan and track your work, dealing with budgets, having playbooks, how do you handle all your meetings, things like that. And tools can be how do you access software or make sure that everyone accesses the right software, building plugins, maintaining them, documentation, design systems, and things like that. Obviously, you can't work on all of these things at once, even if you had a massive design ops team. Your team's priorities are going to determine what you need, and that's going to look very different for different teams, and even it's going to look different for the same team at different points in time. For example, maybe your most urgent need right now is to hire a lot of designers, and in 3 to 6 months, you need to shift your focus towards onboarding a bunch of designers, and maybe in 6 to 12 months, you need to change your focus again, and you're going to be focusing on designer happiness, designer growth, because you want everyone that you've managed to hire to stay and to be happy at your company and to stay for as long as possible. So DesignOps brings a strategic vision to that list of things so that you identify what you want to do and then you design and implement solutions that get you there. It brings strategy and implementation together instead of just implementing operational improvements without that bigger vision and the bigger goals. It's important to identify what's going to be the most impactful thing for the team now and also in the future. What are the design team's goals for the next few months, up to a few years, and how can design operations support that vision. And it's also important to consider what's going to have a positive impact on the teams that work with design, not just on the design team. So are there problems that are important to solve that would impact the other teams that you're working with? And what would the world look like if you were able to solve these problems? Many times this work is invisible and unsung. It's a little bit like glue when you need it. It's the kind of work that if it stops being done, the cracks start to show, people start to become demoralized, and you notice the mood is shifting, and people are unhappy. Maybe the quality of the work decreases, people may even start leaving, and then the problem becomes really noticeable. If the system is strong, if the API is well designed, it's easier to navigate between the different parts of the system, so within design and between design and other areas of the company, and work generally should feel better and things should flow more smoothly, hopefully. The DesignOps team at GitHub has been officially formed fairly recently, earlier this year, as a cohesive unit that is working together and across the design org. When I say design org, I mean design team. Design at GitHub is made of various different smaller teams with different areas of responsibility. And each of us that are part of the design operations team is embedded into one or more of the smaller design teams. And we also work on initiatives across the entire design org. I am part of the design systems team, so most of the examples today are going to be specific to the design systems team. Our design operations team is still building our DesignOps API. We're definitely not at a stable point yet. We were doing design operations before we were an official team, but without the same kind of intentionality and look at the future, without having that bigger vision that we do now. As a software company and a developer-focused product, we will always have more engineers than designers. So how can designers deliver value working with all of our partners across the company instead of being a bottleneck? How can we raise the bar when it comes to design quality and also make design more accessible to more people within the company? This thinking informs the way that we need to think about how we design our API, how we define those endpoints and connections between designers, and the rest of the company. And something to note that in most of our initiatives is that we always try to use our own GitHub tooling so that we can be closer to engineering and closer to how the rest of the company works. So that's a common thread across a lot of our initiatives. So some things we tried. There's a lot of things that we want to work on and improve. It's a long list of things. There's things we've tried and implemented and worked well, and also stuff that didn't work. We're always learning. No one has this figured out. Let's look at a few examples of our work. So the first example is our design onboarding projects. This is a project that had good results from the start, but where there's also a lot of room for improvement. So if you don't know GitHub projects, it's a feature of GitHub. It's a little bit like Kanban boards with a bunch of features. And we created these projects that list tasks and resources that you can do and read when you join in your first day, in your first week, first month, and so on. And we made these onboarding projects because we're working with very distributed teams across the globe, many different time zones, and on top of that, people also have their own flexible schedule. So it's very easy for there to be quiet times when there's no one available. And we want people to feel like they were learning and understanding the company and how the company works at their own pace. And also learning by using our own tools and by getting familiar with the product itself. And by doing this, it also removes a lot of time-consuming manual work from design managers and hiring managers. And it adds consistency to the onboarding experience. So we're establishing a baseline for a good experience for all the designers that join. And since we launched those projects, we gathered feedback and we iterated based on what we've heard from managers, from the new team members, from their onboarding buddies. And feedback was very positive from the start, but we also noticed things that we could improve. For example, because those project boards, they don't live in a central place for all the different design teams. Each team has their own copy of the board, so it meant that it quickly started to get hard to keep the information up to date, things that were relevant across the board. And also just generally there was some information that was confusing to new joiners or was missing. And you only learn about these things if you proactively seek this feedback when you implement and try something, as you would do for any other design thing. The general feedback on the project boards, again, was positive from the start. People would say, oh, I didn't have this in my previous company. This was really useful. And it could have left it like that. But as we started to dig in some more and having individual conversations with people and made it very, very clear that we wanted to hear both the good and the bad, folks started to bring things up that could be better. So be welcoming of feedback, even if people might be saying things that you've tried already and you don't agree with. Maybe you think, oh, this doesn't fit the company or how we work. You should still write it down, sleep on it, come back to it a few days later, ask a few more people and see if there's something there that you can change. Many times, these processes that just need a few tweaks and a few edits to make the information more clear or the steps more clear, more easy to understand. And you also need to give time to see if a new process is successful, but you shouldn't just let it linger without a review. You need to keep checking in and talking to people. You may even have to sunset some of these processes at some point as the team grows, as things change in the way that you work, as people stop engaging with it and you notice that people are using it less and doing it less. So it's good to come back to them at processes that you've implemented and check if they're still fit for purpose at different stages of their life. The second example is about how the design systems team works with other teams. So design systems, the team has partnerships across the company, and other teams are dependent on our work to deliver on their own commitments. But we're still trying to find a good way for people to just come to us with proposals and requests in a way that both balances their needs and their deadlines with our own timelines as we're building foundational infrastructure for the design system, and we need to maintain a system that scales in a sustainable way, which generally means going slower than feature teams. Currently, there's various ways to come to the design systems team. There's no single point of entry, which I think is a barrier in itself. So before you even get started speaking with us, you're already a little bit confused, so you're not having a great experience from the start. We've also explored with different ways to communicate our progress and communicate our upcoming work and what our priorities are. Again, by nature, design systems is slower, but how can we work in a way that doesn't block other teams, because that's not sustainable for a company that is growing and it's not a way to scale design. We've tried a few things, for example, maintaining a backlog of our work, which includes unscheduled work and planned work and in-progress work, with a high-level view for quick consumption for partners and a detailed view, a detailed breakdown for the teams actually working on the system to use on a daily basis. We also started publishing fortnightly changelog with key changes and work in progress, calls for comment. It's just a little bit more editorialized than your regular changelog, but it's fundamentally a changelog. And we have office hours, which a lot of teams do, but office hours are just hard to get right, just because of time zones, and also sometimes it's hard for people who attend to explain the context of their questions in a very short time. So there's room for improvement there as well. It's hard to balance what makes sense for our partners to know about what we're doing and know how they can slot into our priorities with the need for the design systems team itself, who need to know what they need to be working on right now and next at a much more granular level. As we simplify the process for one end, you may be making it harder to understand for the other or to use for the other end. And it's also hard to keep teams up to date with every time that you just tweak the process. If you make too many changes, people depend more and more on the PM and on design operations to know just how to navigate the process itself, and that's not good. But it's all not everything is dire, but there's really big room for improvement in how we're doing things right now. One of my goals when I'm working on anything is to not be needed once the process is established. So I get bored very quickly. I like to move between projects. I don't love to work on something for a very long time. So if I'm needed for something to run smoothly forever, then I'm not doing myself or the team any favors. So I always think about removing myself out of the equation. I think that's a good way to create processes that are clear to understand and well documented and that don't feel like a burden on the rest of the team. And I have implemented systems that fell apart once I took 1 or 2 weeks off. And to me, that's a clear sign that something needs to be changed in that system if it can be easily maintained when someone is not there. Maintainability is super important. You can always come back sometime later to revisit the systems that you've implemented and adapt and change things to the current needs, but you shouldn't be hand-holding folks through every single process that you implement, or you're never going to be able to move on to the next thing. My third example is how we share a work in progress within the design system team. So the previous example was about working with other teams, and this is about the dynamics within the team, the design systems team itself. This is one of the most common pieces of feedback from my team. People want to know what the rest of the team is working on. And this happens because the team, at least by the time I went on leave, had more than 20 people, maybe it has more now. And they're all divided into much smaller teams, so they have different projects, different objectives, different meetings that they attend, so they want to know what everyone else is working on. And we've tried several things like just the regular show and tells. We've also tried much faster lightning shares. We've tried more asynchronous things like posting weekly in an issue, in a GitHub issue or a GitHub discussion thread where you post comments with links to your prototypes and your mockups. And we've also tried asking people to share short videos in Slack whenever they wanted. Time zones get in the way of meetings if we're trying to share in meetings. And when the task is asynchronously, other tasks and other meetings just tend to get in the way, and async things sometimes start to sound optional and people eventually stop doing them. And also some people are really good at sharing async. Some people are always ready to share in meetings. Everyone is different. We've also tried forcing everyone to share. We've tried making it voluntary. We haven't found a perfect solution yet, but we are still trying. And to me, this highlights DesignOps conundrum, which is you don't want to continue a ritual that is not working just because it's in the calendar, but you can't also be changing things all the time. You need to give things time to trial them and see if they meet the objective. And maybe you started them in an unusual week or even an unusual month. So how can you create a culture where people are happy to change, but also understand that humans need a certain degree of stability in their lives and in their day-to-day? You can't keep throwing breaking changes at them. Finally, there's a lot of things that we want to work on in the future. For example, we would love to have improved designer onboarding process. So we would like to develop something like a GitHub designer bootcamp that introduces designers to how design works at GitHub, the history, the vision, what tools we're using right now, what are the existing processes, to create a sense of community, to create from the beginning a sense that you're part of design, you're part of something, and to develop relationships and trust, which is really key to creating great design and great collaboration. And doing that, creating that designer onboarding bootcamp would also help the design systems team in a few ways. So there would be a consistent way of introducing people to the design system. It would reduce a lot of the current dependency on design systems team members to be available for one-on-one intros. We would be creating self-serve materials like videos, tutorials, and we would be letting people learn at their own pace and when they need it. And also, hopefully, we could think about how could we break the ice of the first contribution and of reaching out to the design systems team for proposals and collaboration and questions just right from the beginning. That was just an example of projects the design operations team wants to work on. Designer onboarding and introducing people to the design system are areas where there is currently a lot of duplication of work, a lot of individual and manual work that doesn't match the size of the company right now and doesn't match the size of the teams anymore. The processes that exist worked well at some point, but the company just grew exponentially, and the demands on the design team and the design system have also increased. Working on something like that would involve collaboration between not just design operations, but design managers, product designers, and maybe even other disciplines that would want to use the materials as well. So it would be a big project with broad impact and a great example of something that design operations can drive, because there's a lot of moving pieces, which tends to be a common thread across design operations initiatives. I could list ideas I have of projects and initiatives that I'd love to work on for another hour or 2 hours if needed. But I just wanted to give you an example of something that we have not done yet. Maybe other companies have done it, but we haven't, and we want to work on it. So I hope that some of this has resonated with you, and things that you've seen in your company, gaps that maybe you've noticed and you weren't sure how to solve them or who is responsible for solving them. I just have 2 more things that I want to share with you before I wrap up. The first is that you shouldn't start from zero in design operations. You should look for things that are working well and amplify them. So maybe there's a meeting already that always leaves people energized, or there's an issue or a ticket that generated a lot of comments, a lot of healthy discussion and engagement. What was good about them? And how can you amplify that? How can you repeat that and pave the way for more good? You try something and you keep iterating. Some things may not work. You try to add just enough process. Don't try and write loads of new rules at first, because that's going to be discouraging. And it's going to make it harder also for you if you need to iterate it later because you've invested too much time on it already. DesignOps should also look for ways to connect with existing systems, not create everything from scratch. A lot of the DesignOps work is deeply connected with work being done in different parts of the company. For example, if you're designing career ladders for designers, you should consider what systems and policies HR has created that you should plug into. But even though HR has put in place those policies, HR doesn't necessarily care about a designer's career ladder. HR is working with people for the benefit of the company. And that's where DesignOps comes in to fill in the gaps without starting from nothing. And my second point is that long list of potential things that a DesignOps team can be working on is probably being done by someone, even if you don't have a DesignOps person or team. If there is no dedicated people, a lot of it ends up being done by people with different titles. So design managers tend to take up a lot of that work when there's a lot more important design manager work that they could be doing. Project managers pick up a lot of the slack just due to the nature of their role. And other people who may be passionate about certain aspects of the work, they may end up taking extra work, like community-related work and project management. Maybe can you think of someone that you work with who's always happy to drive projects? That seems to be just slightly adjacent to real work. Or someone who's super organized and they end up managing the project, but they're a designer or an engineer, so that's not really their job. Who is doing this now at your company? Could it potentially be you that is doing this? Is this work being rewarded? Is it being celebrated? Is it being seen? Are these folks able to highlight these efforts during their review cycles? Or are they being penalized for wasting time on this kind of thing? If they are, then this is holding them back. So should they be doing the work that will get them promoted instead? Should this kind of work be delegated, shared, or even dropped? If people are trying to maintain this DesignOps API single-handedly on the side, that's not a sustainable way of doing things. That's not a maintainable API. At some point, it's going to break. If, like me, you actually enjoy this part of the work more, maybe, but maybe you don't have an official title yet, is it time to consider a change to DesignOps and an official DesignOps role? There's a lot more to talk about moving from being a designer to being DesignOps, and obviously a lot more to talk about DesignOps itself. My wish is that what you've heard here today gives you a better picture of how DesignOps slots into the day-to-day of a well-functioning design team and can be the glue that connects the dots and the people and the knowledge and the work. And if you thought of someone in your company that is quietly in the background, making sure that this machine is well-oiled and running smoothly, maybe let them know that you see them and that you appreciate them and their efforts. That's it. Thank you.